Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today in Clash Royale with a very special guest. It is Ruben. He is my clanmate over in Elite Gaming. He is one of our best competitive players. So happy to have him on. He's also an Indian pro, and I know that's been a really popular request. India, of course, being my second largest demographic of viewers on my channel, so this ought to make a lot of people happy. Ruben, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
You actually have a very interesting story, right? You moved to the United States 3 days ago, is that correct?
Yep.
So, how do you like it so far?
It's been great. There's not much vegetarian food though here.
No vegetarian food?
No.
Oh, you're a vegetarian, eh?
Yeah, prefer veg.
Okay, all right. So, what is your biggest surprise from like America versus? What's the biggest difference in America versus India, where you're from?
Depends honestly. The weather is quite weird. Like in India, I don't think like when it goes to evening, it doesn't get that much cold. And whereas here, the temperature drops really quick.
Yeah, and you're in California. That's easy over there.
Yeah.
So if you think that's cold, come over here to the East Coast, man. But welcome to America as your YouTube ambassador today. But seriously, happy to have you on the channel. Before we get into the deck that you're going to be sharing with us, because it's a really cool graveyard cycle deck, that you're something insane in grand challenges. What are you 34-2 or 36-4?
36 and 36 and 4.
36-4 with this graveyard cycle deck. I thought that graveyard wasn't that good anymore, but you're proving otherwise in a fast graveyard cycle deck. Before we get to the deck itself, tell me a little bit about yourself. How long have you been playing Clash Royale, and what brought you to Elite Gaming?
So started probably 3 months after beta. My brother just introduced me to the game casually, started playing, and then once I got selected in CRW season one Team India, then I started thinking that I was kind of good at the game, and then from there on onwards, it just became better and better and better.
How to what do you kind of to what do you say that how did you get better? Was there something that just clicked in you, or was it just an evolving process?
I would say it's an evolving process because it started off me being like the worst guy in the clan, and then slowly I kind of like got up to top five in the clan trophy wise, and then I started playing tournaments and stuff, and then I realized that I wasn't that good at the start, but slowly it kind of got better and better. I used to not even come first in 25 card tournaments, and then it
Well,
started, and it grew casually.
Well, this is very interesting to me because, like, I consider myself not a great player, and the fact that you got better and better and better gives me hope. So, tell me, Ruben, what did you get better at? If you don't know, if there wasn't like one defining moment in your trajectory as a player, what were the parts of your game that you felt made a big difference once you improved them?
I would say just watching replays and trying to find where you do your mistakes. That's probably where I kind of improved upon. There used to be a time where I used to play Hog Trifecta, the Nick deck,
Yeah.
with Hog, Valkyrie, and Muskie in it. And I used to lose to giant, what was the deck? Giant Lumberjack balloon decks. And I used to get so frustrated by just losing to them. And it used to be my old clan leader's deck, and there was no way I could get past it. So I just kept watching the replays on where I used to do mistakes. How could I have done better? And eventually, I kind of overtook him in that way.
Okay,
So it's
so
just like finding where your mistakes are and improving upon them. That's basically it.
easy enough. So, identify your mistakes and just say, okay, what could I have done better in that situation?
Mhm.
Okay. So tell us about, before we talk about this deck, specifically all the cards in it, the cycle
Mhm.
variation of Graveyard, tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about Graveyard in general. Obviously, you're a big fan of the card, even after the
Yeah.
pretty substantial nerf. What do you think
Mhm.
about the nerf, and what do you think about the card now?
So the card now is quite good, and it's not that good in general. Like earlier, you could have just dropped a graveyard poison and taken out like 1000 HP off your opponent's tower, 1000 to 1500, or even take the tower if it was unattended. Now it takes more skill to use the card because it's 9 seconds in total, which is 15 skeletons, and you know. A poison takes is 8 seconds long, so effectively a poison can counter graveyard and help build a counter push. So unless you know you're properly supporting your graveyard, there is no way you're gonna get damage on your opponent's tower. It's reached a point in the game where where you cannot just it's not a skillless card anymore, if you wanted to use that word. It's you require now to have a proper support behind it, and you require it to take damage of the take sometimes I even use the graveyard as a tank for Inferno Dragon to hit the tower when I can't reach anywhere. So
Interesting.
because there
So,
are many cases where there are so many counters to graveyard now. There's bats, there's goblins, there's even heavier cards like Witch, Valkyrie. They don't let graveyard do any damage on the tower. Like Witch just straight up hard counters it. So you should know where you should identify if your graveyard is going to do damage or not. And depending upon that, you should adapt your playstyle.
okay, so we know how to play Graveyard. What about
Mm-hmm.
Graveyard in this deck? This is a deck that is a fast cycle deck,
Mm-hmm.
and ideally in the old Graveyard cycle decks, you'd be playing Graveyard as many times as humanly possible, right? Because it's a cycle deck, and
Yeah.
you can outcycle your opponent's counter to Graveyard. But
Mm-hmm.
in this deck, where you just told us you need to be able to support it properly, how often and how aggressive are you going to be with your Graveyard?
It mostly depends. See, now it depends upon the deck I'm facing. If I'm facing a three musky deck, at max I'm going to drop like two graveyards before overtime.
Okay.
But if I'm facing a minor control deck, it'll probably be like more than thrice.
Okay.
Because
And
it all depends upon how the counter to the decks are faced. Like if I drop a graveyard poison on one side of the tower and your opponent just defends it using like bats and log and pumps up on the other side, I basically lose the match. There's no way I can come back. So it all depends upon how you're controlling your opponent's elixir by playing your graveyard.
oh,
You can probably play grave if your opponent pumps up in the middle and you punish with a graveyard. That's like the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is your opponent pumps on the left side and you graveyard the right. That's like
yes.
throwing away elixir.
So let's stop with the pump point that you made there, because I think that's a really good point to cover. Is
Mm-hmm.
when your opponent elixir it drops that elixir pump behind one of the
Mm-hmm.
princess towers. Are you always, regardless of what you were doing previously, are you always going to immediately attack that side with like a graveyard poison?
Or just poison. The secret to graveyard decks is that they require you to have a equal elixir or higher elixir than your you need to be on equal or higher elixir than your opponent to use graveyard poison. That's the main scenario. The reason graveyard loses to like pump decks or three musky decks is because you fall behind an elixir and there's no way you can attack. Graveyard is a five elixir card. You can't just drop it and hope that you'll come back with elixir to defend whatever your opponent drops. Graveyard decks win just because they are meant to be overly defensive, if that even makes any sense.
Okay.
You defend a lot with graveyard decks, and then you basically attack with whatever is left on the board.
Okay. Okay. That
Like
actually helps me a lot.
there are many replays where I have actually cycled Inferno Dragons at the back rather than attacking, just so that I don't give my opponent a tower advantage. Graveyard decks mostly shine by winning 1-0 or 2-0 to 1. But the 2-1 situation is very tough to manage because with the King Tower shooting your Ice Golem and the Princess Tower shooting it, the Ice Golem dies so fast you can't tank much hits.
Okay, so you say that even though it's a 3.1 deck, talk
Hmm.
about how the cheap cost of the deck kind of mixes with the idea that you want to play defensively. So, how are you using the cheap cost to your advantage when you're trying to focus on defense first?
I'm mainly using the Inferno Dragon as my defense.
Okay.
Like for Inferno Dragon to work successfully in defense, there are two main things which you have to avoid. One is it getting resetted. So placement is important. You can't place it to the left and place an ice golem to the right and watch it kite a Mega Knight or a P.E.K.K.A. or something. So it'll just lose its lock on and it'll just keep floating in midair. So that one thing is important. And the second is the reset. Evil has seen such a rise in the meta, so that I use the cycle card mostly to distract the evils.
Okay. So talk us through your mindset going into a match with this deck. Like, just pretend you don't even know what your opponent is playing right now and just kind
Mm-hmm.
of walk us through maybe the different phases or transitions in the match once you have no idea what your opponent is playing, and then maybe as just an example scenario as you go through the match and how you're going to change your tempo and your play style accordingly throughout the match.
Okay, so let's just take a scenario of my opponent's using minor poison P.E.K.K.A.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that deck, the main deck has minor poison P.E.K.K.A, Ewiz, Bandit, and the two cycle cards. Oh, and
Mm-hmm.
Zap, of course. So I need to first memorize my opponent's card rotation. Not memorize, just have a vague idea of how the cards are placed. Cycle cards don't matter in this case because they are just played at the back to cycle.
Okay.
So in this case, my opponent can take out my Inferno Dragon in two possible ways. One is Zap plus Bats, and second is the Ewiz itself. So I have to make sure those two cards are not in the opponent's rotation when he plays his P.E.K.K.A. Or those two cards are dead as fast as possible, so that my Inferno Dragon can get the most value while defending. On offense, Minor Poison doesn't stand a chance against graveyard decks because there is no physical way to defend. Cycle cards just die to poison.
Okay. So, man, that's a lot of thinking that you're doing in a match. Now I know why I'm not a pro player. Okay. So let's give us, for dumb people like me, give us like a watered down version of what we, because you're keeping track of a lot of stuff here. You're keeping track of where their win condition is. You're keeping track of where their tanks are, so and where their Ewiz is or their Zap or whatever, so then you can know where to play the Inferno Dragon. So kind of baby steps here, Ruben. Baby steps. What should
Okay,
be the
I'm
first
sorry.
thing I should focus on when playing this deck? Like,
Okay.
am
So
yeah,
the starting play, you mean you're asking about how to do the best starting play?
sure. Let's start there. What better place to
Okay.
start? Yeah.
Okay, so basic the start depending on your hand, you can either cycle your cycle cards at the back. That's you can play goblins at the bridge or you can play bats at the bridge. There's no point splitting them because they won't do any damage.
Okay.
So you can either drop them at the bridge or wait 30 seconds until the match starts.
Okay.
That's what I typically do. Like if I have Ice Golem, cycle cards, and graveyard, and then my next card is Poison. I typically wait 30 seconds until the match has started to see if my opponent is either pumping up or playing a huge tank in the back. If until that my opponent hasn't done anything, then I'll probably go aggressive with the graveyard poison, with Ice Golem tanking, or I would just cycle cards in the back till I have my graveyard poison in my hand.
Okay, let's talk about that very first graveyard poison that you're going to use, or that very first graveyard that you're going to use. So let's just say you are going against. Let's say you're going against something different this time. Let's say you're going against a P.E.K.K.A Hog Lightning deck, right?
Okay.
So when would be your ideal first graveyard? Would it be after defending, say, the Hog?
Yeah, after defending.
So you defend with the Hog. Let's say you defended with like goblins. You would drop the Ice Whiz at the bridge and then drop graveyard.
Ice Golem and graveyard. Yeah.
Yep. And then would you use poison, or would that be? Let's say they
Uh,
countered with bats. Would using poison be an
no,
overextension at that point?
it would be an overextension. I would rather use Zap if I have it in my hand, or rather wait till to see if opponent has dropped anything else.
Okay. Let's say they don't drop anything else, and you don't have zap. Would you drop poison then, or would you just sit on it?
No, sit on it because
Okay.
graveyard poison with an Ice Golem is 11 elixir commitment. You can't use that in single elixir. And
Okay.
if you fail in that push, you're basically dead for the rest of the match. Your opponent will just drop stuff at the bridge, and there's no way you can answer it.
Okay. So you have to, when using this deck, you're really not going to want to graveyard poison unless you either have like a weird, really big elixir advantage, or unless it's double elixir time. Am I right
Yeah,
there?
yeah. Or in case your opponent has pumped up and you're getting value.
Okay, so let's do that. The opponent pumps up. Let's say they're playing a Three Musketeer deck. They pump up, and you were basically even in elixir before they pumped. Are
Hmm.
you going to in single elixir time? Are you going to play the Ice Golem right at the bridge and then drop the graveyard and see how they react?
Yeah, straight on the pump and poison on the pump. Because there's no
Okay,
way skeletons hit the pump anyways if it's placed in the middle.
okay. And what about defense with this deck? Defensively, obviously, we know you're going to be using the cycle cards. We know you're going to be relying heavily on the Inferno Dragon. Are there any
Mm-hmm.
tips you have beyond that?
uh, Placement of the cards is very important. Like
Okay.
if you see a goblin barrel coming in, you always place your goblins to the left or to the right of the tower at the extreme end near the edge of the arena, rather than placing them towards the middle to mitigate most damage. These small tips and tricks are basically the only way graveyard can build up elixir and mitigate much damage of your tower.
Okay, that's interesting. So what about and obviously you're going to be leaning heavily on the eWiz. If folks at home don't have the eWiz, is there a good substitution? I know it's tricky.
Ewiz, the reason Ewiz is used is mostly because of the spawns app, plus the reason that it stuns. So typically substitutions for this deck for both the legendaries, there is a really good cannon card graveyard deck which can be used as well. But cannon card is a really tricky card to use, even harder to use than in Inferno Dragon.
Yes. So okay, but you would advise people use Cannon Car instead of Inferno Dragon if they don't have him?
Yeah, cannon card and Mega Minion instead for Ewiz and minions instead for bats with arrows instead for zap. That's basically the substitution.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's talk about before we let you go here. I really like this deck, but I want to talk about how to handle different archetypes a little bit. So, what do you find is the most tricky matchup, and how do you handle it?
Most tricky matchup probably Three Muskies and Siege.
Okay, let's talk about Three Muskies at first. Obviously, we know because we just talked about it that you're going to be attacking the pump. What beyond that should we know?
Now there are many versions of Three Muskies out there. The ones I practice with my clanmates is the Bandit Horde one, which is the 4.1 Bandit
Yeah.
Horde Three Muskie deck. So that deck is very tricky to play against because if you don't have Ewiz in your hand, you're basically using your Ice Golem to attack, right? If you don't have Ewiz in your hand plus Zap, the Horde just takes your tower. No offense. It just comes, takes it and moves on.
Yeah.
So that is the only hard matchup for this deck in Three Muskies. The Three Muskie cycle deck is easy to play against, but if you cannot answer their first pump, and this goes for any pump deck, if you cannot answer the first pump, you fall behind too much and you can't come back.
Okay, so how do you deal? I mean, obviously you're going to be at a huge disadvantage, but how do you deal with that? How do you How do you try to come back? Do you play more conservatively or do you play more aggressively? If for whatever
More
reason,
conservatively,
more
because
conservative.
you cannot play more aggressive with Graveyard because it's already a 5 elixir deployment.
Yes. Okay. So that's a good transition into. What about Siege? You mentioned Siege as well. Any tips to
Yeah,
Siege?
there is no tank. If you're using the cannon card version, siege is easy. You just drop the cannon card, it takes care of the siege unit. But when you're playing with the 3.1 deck, there is physically no answer to siege unless you just keep poisoning the, mortar or expo and letting the ice golem tank for it. But in doing that, you don't have any tanks for the graveyard.
I know, right? So
That
how
is
do you
the
deal
only
with it?
problem with siege.
Yeah.
Um, the only actual reason that matchup comes to is card rotation and cycle poison and poisoning cycling. Nothing else.
Okay. So
Or
just
getting lucky with an Inferno Dragon graveyard. That's it. You can't do anything else in that matchup.
So basically, you try to use Inferno Dragon to tank for a graveyard if possible, because you're not going to be able to use your Ice Golem, and
Yes.
you save your Ice Golem to counter the siege
Uh huh.
and
And
poison
poison.
cycle and poison. All right. Well, hey, at least we got a game plan. It might not work, but at least you have a game plan.
Yeah.
But Ruben, I just want,
But
yeah,
the graveyard deck is very, how do you say it? It's very, you adapt to your opponent's player deck while using graveyard the most because graveyard is very tricky to use against, even against log bait. It's very hard to use because they can just cycle princesses in the back without any answer to them because you don't have any log in this deck.
yeah.
So
So how do you handle Zapbait then?
the I use basically bats for if first I check whether my opponent has zap or lock, and if they have zap, I use goblins on defending the barrel, and if they have log, I use bats to defend the goblin barrel. I just poison the princess or use the inferno dragon on defense to take out the princesses, and mostly ice golem graveyard works, but the knight has way too much health. So poison doesn't do anything to him.
Indeed, indeed. So would it be advantageous to add a knight into this deck for Ice Golem, or no?
Not really, because the Frost Nova of Ice Golem is very useful in this
That's
deck.
true. That's true.
Because the Frost Nova
And
basically
zap.
is your reply to any swarm unit which comes.
Yeah. And plus, you can take out Minion Horde with Zap,
Exactly.
and yeah. All right. Well, I think that we have a good understanding of the deck. I can't wait to actually play it a little bit, and just want to thank
It's a
you
very
again.
tricky deck to use, though. It's not
And
that easy.
it's a high skill cap deck. It seems
Yeah,
like. Yeah.
relatively high skill cap.
All right, well, I can't wait to try it out. I'll probably, fail miserably, but hey, it's always fun trying a deck like this, especially Graveyard, which isn't in the meta right now at all. So I just
Uh-huh.
wanted to thank you again for coming on the channel, Ruben. Best of luck inside the U.S. in your
Mm-hmm.
schooling and your endeavors. Any shout outs, anything like that before we let you go?
I would like to shout out my APAC team who got to top 8 this season. Krishnan, Rampy, Jugal, Tuck, whoever played with me in APAC. Then the guys from CRW Team India, like Seth and the others who did very well. Practicing them mostly because they helped me a lot while practicing decks and stuff. And the guys at Elite Gaming who are always useful and helpful.
Nice, man. Well, nice shout outs there. And I just want to thank you again for coming on. It's been a pleasure, man.
Thanks for having me on your channel.
No problem, Ruben. Guys, that's going to do it. I hope you enjoyed this deck in this video. Ruben was great in explaining it, and it seems like a really fun deck to play. So I can't wait to give it a shot myself. We're not gonna guarantee that I'll go 36-4 or whatever, but we'll give it our best shot. So huge shout out to Bren Chong, my YouTube partner. You can see his information in the description below. Just wanted to thank all of you guys for watching. Your continued support means the world to me. So as always, take care, guys.